Welcome back to another video. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are working on the drift truck yet again. Now in the last episode, as you can tell, we finished the suspension. For the first time since we started modifying this truck, it's sitting on the ground with its new front coilover system, its new rear lowering springs in the back. It's sitting really, really well. Today we are hopefully going to be mounting the Miata steering rack in the truck, so then we will have steering. It should be pretty simple. I've done it before, except I had to cut it out because I did it poorly. It will really depend on if we can get it to clear the oil pan of the engine, which is this bad boy right here, if you're new to the channel, this 1UZ V8. Real quick, before this video continues any farther, I've got some exciting news. The new pack of air fresheners is now available for pre-sale. So if you guys want to pick up some awesome air fresheners with designs of the drift truck, the Adventure Bus, Molly, and the Rally Miata on them, while also helping support this build, helping it get done by a month, because that's the goal, to finish the truck in a month. If you want to help make that happen and you want to get yourself some air fresheners, go to the link in the description down below, go to my website, and purchase a set. There is only 100 available, so if you want one, you better hop on it now. Keep in mind it is pre-sale though, which means they won't ship out for another week, another couple of weeks. Also, for those of you who are on Patreon, go over to Patreon. I have a discount code for you guys if you also want to buy a pack of air fresheners. And resume the video now. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to work on mounting the steering rack. Before I do anything, I want to make sure it fits. So we're gonna go put the truck back on the lift. We're gonna kind of put the steering rack where we want it to go, and then we're gonna put the engine in there and hopefully see that the engine fits with the steering rack. So this is literally exactly where we want the engine to sit. It's about as far back as it can possibly go. It's about as far up as it can possibly go. We want it to be as high as possible just because we want it to be able to clear the steering shaft that goes right here, the steering rack, the subframe, all sorts of stuff. And it is still really low in there. It's still significantly lower than the fenders, so it is still pretty low in terms of engine placement. But this is as high as it can go because of that right there. There's the steering rack, there's the subframe, and there's the oil pan. You can't really tell, but I think there's room. So I'm gonna go ahead and start kind of like test fitting that, mocking it up, seeing where we should place it. It's exactly in the middle, clears both the strut towers, which is good. That is kind of where the motor mounts are gonna be going. Problem with that is that the motor mounts kind of want to go right where the steering shaft wants to go, so we'll have to figure out something for that. Who knows? It just looks so amazing with the meaty tires, with a little bit of poke, and this big old V8 tucked in there. Oh, it looks so damn good. I'm so excited. Also, for anyone who is asking, is wondering, we are going to remove all the factory wiring and stuff and repaint the engine bay a nice glossy black, but it's gonna look so good with the black engine bay. I want to paint the valve covers and the intake manifold like a nice silver. I want the engine to pop in there. It looks so good. So this is the steering rack. The previous mounts I made pretty much welded this little mount that the steering rack bolts onto straight onto the subframe. The problem is that these mounts are far enough apart so you can't weld it into this part, you have to weld it onto this part. As you can tell, that's where I welded it for the old mounts. But the problem is that then you can't get to the bolts. We want to weld it to this middle section so you can drop it off. So what we're going to do to fix that is take this section of tube, weld it to the mounts, and then weld this part closer towards the middle onto the subframe. So I went ahead and made these guys. These kind of go on the square tube like so and get welded to that, and then this side gets welded to the mounts on the steering rack. Thanks camera for focusing. Let's go ahead and tack these up. Well, I just happened to run out of gas. So, it's time to go to Air Gas to go get some more gas. Not too bad. Tank of gas. Gotta drink a lot of these so I don't die in this freaking heat. Let's go. Mama-mobile. Woo! Now, what do I want to do? Test fit the engine, probably? Either test fit the engine or connect the steering shaft. Let's test fit the engine first. So right now, the engine is pressed, the oil pan is pressed up against the steering rack. So this is as far back as the engine can go. It's a pretty good position. We can only go back a quarter of an inch, half an inch maybe. So is it worth it? I don't think it is. I think right here is where we're pretty much gonna put the engine and stuff. There's not a ton of room for a radiator, but if we can get the radiator to tuck underneath here, it should be enough. The way we have it mounted, we can lower the engine quite a bit too, so we could do that if we wanted to. That'd be kind of cool. I guess that is that. Let's go ahead and pull this engine out, weld up the mount for the steering rack, and then modify the that thingy to work with the steering rack. And then we can work on our ball joints and stuff like that. Before I weld up the mount, I'm gonna go ahead and modify the steering rack shaft to work with the Miata steering rack. Now, the spline and thread count for this little fitting right here is all the same, but the Miata steering rack has a little notch out on it. So we're just gonna take an angle grinder and cut a little notch in here, and it should work with the Miata steering rack. Let's see if that fits. It fit, it worked. It's a little rough getting it in there. All right, cool, that's modified. I'm gonna go ahead and make the steering rack mount a little more mounty, a little less flobby. The steering rack is in, it's connected to the steering wheel and to each wheel itself. Let's go and try it. Oh. It works! We have a Mazda B2200 with Miata coilovers and a Miata steering rack. It clears the 1UZ. It works. So yeah, the steering rack is in. It is currently working. As you can tell, it is connected to the steering wheel. I will say the steering ratio of the manual rack, this is a manual Miata steering rack. It's not as quick as the power steering rack, which kind of sucks, but that's okay. So in order to get the steering rack to fit properly where we had it mounted, I had to shorten the driver's side outer tie rod end, or inner tie rod end, sorry. At first I thought this was like something you don't want to do, but turns out it's actually fine if you shorten one of the tie rods. The only thing it affects is bump steer, and as long as you have a correct steering geometry. You won't have bump steer, so it shouldn't matter too much. As you can tell, this is the seam. I cut it, I shortened it 2.5 inches, and then I re-welded it. To make it a little bit stronger, to prevent it from bending or anything, I'm gonna go ahead, put this metal sleeve over it, and weld it up. These are like the best welds I've ever done in my entire life. Now, you have to excuse the beginning part. So this left section, I had to start and stop because I had to get into a comfortable position. But this second section, look at those beads, dude. This is with a MIG welder. That is so amazing. I am in love. And then you got the nice coloration on the frame. You got some good penetration. The entire thing was glowing red hot after I welded it. Oh, it's so... Kind of sounds like a fire alarm. Those are some nice welds, and that is the reinforcement I added to the main hoop, as you can tell. So now there's more places that's welding to the frame. Some more over here, good welds, pretty good welds, pretty good welds. I'm gonna go ahead and keep welding and ignore the fire alarm that's going off. There we go. The steering rack is in the truck. The entire steering rack mount is welded up. It looks kind of bad just because it's, well, the welds are dirty right now, but it's strong, it's in there, it's connected back to the steering wheel. I gave it a very eyeball alignment and actually managed to torque down the tie rod ends because they were really screwed up. But I managed to do it, so let's steer this thing, eh? Okay? Now the beauty of this is that I'm literally barely moving the steering wheel right now, maybe about 1/2 inch, and you can tell the wheel is moving. I'm gonna weld up the shock mounts a little more, then drop it on the ground. I'm also going to remove the e-brake cable and the speedo cable, because we're not gonna be using either of those. Okay, awesome, thank you. Oh my God, there's a fire! Ah! So good! Yay, fire alarm is all done. Caught my shop on fire while building my drift truck. That's what I could have titled this video, but it's what I'm not gonna title this video because I'm better. I'm better than that. But yeah, truck is on the ground, suspension is settled. After welding the bottom thing right there, it flexes significantly less. In fact, it actually still clears the steering shaft, so that's good. Like I said, I'm gonna remove those 2 wires. I don't need them. Besides that, this is pretty much all done. There's a decent amount of clearance. This is pretty much as much clearance as we're gonna get. Hopefully it'll clear the stock headers. I don't think it will. If it doesn't, then I can use, well, then I just have to get some custom headers built, which sucks, but whatever. That's it. That's all for today, I think. Steering rack is in, truck is on the ground again. I don't feel as bad leaving it on the ground now that more of the shock towers are welded up. Steering rack looks good. It's gonna look really awesome with some paint Here's one question I want to ask you guys, or actually, you know, I'm not even gonna ask it, I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna go ahead and trim the wheel well around the shock tower, just so you don't have any rattles in between the wheel well and the shock tower, and also just so you can see the wheel and the suspension. It'll be kind of cool. I forgot to mention this in the beginning of the video, but the reason why we are doing this entire thing, all the steering rack stuff, is just so, number one, we have a more precise steering. The steering box, which is what was in there before, it had a ton of play in the steering wheel. So you had to move it like 2 to 3 inches in order for the truck to actually turn, which obviously terrible for drifting. The other thing is that the steering box had, it doesn't really self-steer, which is really important for drifting. So yet again, that's why we put the steering rack in. The steering rack has a really, really precise steering. Miata steering is awesome, and it should self-steer pretty well. I know all of you guys are concerned about my safety. You're concerned about the truck and stuff. Let me just say that I know what I'm doing. I've talked to a lot of people. I've looked at a lot of designs. My welding is getting a lot better. Once everything is done, it's gonna be strong enough to drift, all right? It's gonna be good. It's not gonna fall apart. The shock towers are gonna be good. We're gonna be doing a lot more reinforcement on the shock towers, but we can't do that until the engine is in there. All the things that you guys are commenting, gussets, dimples, connecting it to the body, it's all stuff I've thought of. I can do some of it, I can't do some of it, but just trust me, I know what I'm doing, I know what the plan is, and it's gonna be awesome and strong when it's done. With that being said, try to tone down the negativity a little bit. You guys aren't really being negative, but you aren't confident in my abilities, so just try to trust me, okay? I know what I'm doing, it's all gonna be good, just trust me. Besides that, let me know what you think of the steering rack. I think for putting a Miata steering rack in a truck that isn't meant to have a steering rack, things worked out really well. So thank you guys. That's all I can say is thank you. I ordered the brakes for the truck, so we're gonna do the brake system pretty soon. So I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.